here with Mail and Guardian Editor-in-Chief Nick Dawes on the second day of the ANC's elective conference here in Mangaung. Now, Nick, we had a packed first day with both the political report and the organisational report. What were some of the highlights for you?
Well, I think the first thing was the kind of feeling in the hall and the balance of forces in the hall, where the pro-Zuma delegates were very much winning the battle of the songs, very much appearing on the ascendant, both in terms of numbers and in terms of noise. And the forces of change were looking pretty subdued and pretty punctured, frankly. There were a couple of attempts at heckling from the back, but nothing that really gained any traction. A couple of filibuster attempts which didn't fly. So I thought that was the first striking bit of evidence that we had confirming what we've been saying, which is that Jacob Zuma's bid is very much on track. Zuma in his speech and Gwede Mantashe in his speech made it very clear that they're going to be very tough on what they see as disciplinary infractions. Zuma was sharply critical of people within the alliance who act as if they were an opposition party. And you can imagine he might have been thinking of COSATU there, or the Youth League. He was very critical of people who take the ANC to court. And it's previously been suggested that people who do that automatically expel themselves from the ANC. Gwede Mantashe also made a number of remarks critical of factionalism and critical of going outside the party to get solutions. So I think you can read that as a very clear warning that, you know, what happened to Julius Malema could happen to other people if they're not careful.
Factionalism seems to have become institutionalized, and comrades have become more bolder in their factional activities. You will find factions even going to the extent of giving themselves names in the provinces. Let me use the Free State because it has already gone to court, where they will call themselves Regime Change and Ramkral. And it's known by everybody that there is regime change and Ramkral, and it looks normal. It is abnormal, it is not normal. We can't institutionalize factions in our movement.
Now, the National Development Plan got quite a surprising amount of airtime in Zuma's speech. Are we likely to see this finally being adopted by government?
I think, aside from the electoral politics and some of the details of the organisational and political reports, the National Development Plan is probably the most important story that's come out of the conference so far. It's something that's been very widely accepted across society, which the ANC has been keen to point out. But response to it has frankly been pretty muted within the ANC. Even though it's the most substantial document on policy that exists that comes out of a broadly ANC-aligned space. The trade union movement didn't like it. There was a very kind of soft acceptance of it by the cabinet, but now it's being driven very, very hard. And it's a great irony, of course, because Trevor Manuel, who is really the architect of that plan and whose vision in many ways it resonates with, has declined nomination to the National Executive Committee. So just at the moment when he steps out of the ANC's highest decision-making body, he finds his plan put at the center of the party's policy plans. And it's really worth noting as well that Cyril Ramaphosa, who is a very serious candidate for Deputy President on the Jacob Zuma slate, is the Deputy Chairperson of the National Planning Commission. And if he takes the kind of role that he's expected to take as a kind of Prime Minister, the way Thabo Mbeki was under Nelson Mandela, then you'll have the Deputy Chairperson of the Planning Commission driving it very hard. So if we're to take all of that seriously, it's a major development.
Anything that we do must enhance the plan. We are given a responsibility to lead on that one. And therefore, we should discuss and pronounce at the end of this conference what is our plan, about the national plan. As the ruling party, what is it and how is the government supposed to implement it? Absolutely important.
We also heard a lot about provinces in the organisational report, and now we see that credentials have seriously delayed the programme. What are your thoughts on the ANC's problems in this regard?
Yeah, there's two questions about provinces. One is the kind of national policy question about whether provinces should continue to have so much power devolved to them as they currently do. And Gwede Mantashe made it pretty clear that we're not going to see major change on that front. Although he did suggest, interestingly, that people should be able to seek services closer to them, so that if they need to cross a provincial boundary to access a hospital or a school that's close by, then they should be able to do that. The other political question around provinces is the political question, that is, those provinces which are seen as more or less supportive of Jacob Zuma, and those provinces where some delegates feel that there was a manipulation of which branches got accredited. There's always a big fight in the ANC as to whether particular groups of delegates are legitimately able to attend conference and to vote. Both in the Free State and the Northwest, there are groups of disgruntled delegates who think that they were excluded by their own provincial executives because they are opposed to Zuma, and both are threatening legal action. That's playing heavily into the adoption of what they call the credentials report. That's the document that stipulates who's here, who's in good standing, and who may vote. So that adoption of that report was delayed. It's now been accepted, but accepted pending resolution of the discussion about the Northwest and the Free State. So this obviously creates a serious risk that the outcome may be seen as illegitimate or challenged in court by one group or another.
Well, a lot to look out in that regard. Now, finally, we woke this morning to some alarming news about an arrest following a bomb threat here in Mangaung. Nick, is this likely to affect the already intense presence of intelligence here at Mangaung?
Well, I spoke a little bit to some of the security people around the venue today, and they said that they had beefed up arrangements and tightened up access in some areas and so forth since it emerged that 7 people had been arrested in connection with allegations of a right-wing terror plot. To be honest, the security is very, very tight already. And certainly I think that this alleged plot will be used to justify the decision to divert so many crime intelligence resources, for example, to Mangaung. I think we're now waiting for the other shoe to drop to see, how clear and present a threat this really was, to see, why arrests didn't happen earlier, if that was the case. And of course, in an environment that's as divided as this one, there are already corridor whispers about, well, this is the tail wagging the dog in a sense, and this report was produced at a convenient time for some in the ANC. But I think, clearly if people are being arrested, there must be some basis for that. So we're going to have to wait for further briefings and further information. There does remain in the country a small and crazy right-wing fringe, and maybe it did have the capacity to pull something off like this. We'll have to see.